Hey, what's going on there, guys? Nick here from Absolute MTG, and I'm back with another deck tech for you. Today we're going to be taking a look at Dega Midrange for the Theros Season of Standard. The entire deck list is down below for you guys that are in a hurry to just take a look at that. I also have the deck list via TappedOut.net in the description below as well. If you guys aren't familiar with any of the cards that we're talking about, all you have to do is scroll your cursor over the names of the cards on TappedOut.net, and a little image is going to pop up, and you can read what the card does and familiarize yourself with it. So, as you guys can notice, the layout's a little bit different for the deck tech. This is kind of like the old style that I used to do, where I actually pick up the cards and show them like up close. So we'll see how this goes. If this works, if people enjoy it, we'll keep doing it like this. If not, we'll switch it back. So Dega Midrange. Dega is the color combination of black, white, and red, just to kind of sum it up for you. And what we're going to be doing here is we're going to be playing a lot of really powerful and good spells in black, white, and red. And we're pretty much going to have it where we're playing like really powerful creatures. We're not really worrying about any of the low drop creatures or anything like that. We have a lot of removal, and we're also playing things like Elspeth, Sun's Champion, just powerful cards overall. So let's take a look at it. So I have the main deck here, and I also have the sideboard, the 15-card sideboard. So we're going to take a look at that afterwards. So first we're going to go through the cards that we have. So we have Blood Baron of Vizkopa. So I'm playing 3 Blood Baron of Vizkopa. We have Obzedat Ghost Council, so I have 2 Obzedats, 2 Sire of Insanity for like the control matchups and anything that's slower, 2 Elspeth Sun's Champion for our Planeswalkers. For removal, I have 2 Chained to the Rocks, 2 Mizzium Mortars. I have 2 Ultimate Price for monocolored creatures. We are playing a entire playset of Hero's Downfall, just because it gets rid of creatures and planeswalkers both, and at an instant speed for 3 mana. 2 Warleader Helix, stealing 4 and allowing us to gain back 4. A playset of Thoughtseize, because hand disruption is really nice, especially up against these slower decks. 2 Rakdos Keyrune, because with this deck it's really greedy if we were to play something like Mutavault, and Rakdos Keyrune both acts as a creature for us and also a outlet for being able to ramp. We are playing Underworld Connections as a 3-of to allow us to draw some cards. 1 Whip of Erebos to give our creatures lifelink, and it also interacts with Obzedat. 2 Rakdos' Return to be able to have our opponent take X and also discard X amount of cards, and it's X, 1 black and 1 red. 1 Assemble the Legion to make tokens for us every single turn. Really good up against decks like Mono Black, especially if they're running things like Desecration Demon. It gives us a reusable outlet of tokens that we can feed the demon with and ultimately just kind of smash our opponents with a ton of 1/1s. And then for the land base we're going to just go over really quick. So we're playing a playset of each of the shocks in our colors. So we're playing a playset of Blood Crypt. We are playing a playset of Sacred Foundry. And we are playing a playset of Godless Shrine. For our Scry lands from Theros, we have a playset of Temple of Triumph, and we have a playset of Temple of Silence to allow us to scry up, especially if we don't need more land drops or if we're trying to dig for something specific. It makes things a little bit better when we get to see what's on top of our library. And then for basic lands, we are playing 3 swamps, we're playing 2 mountains, and 1 single plains. So to go over the cards in the main board and just to kind of talk about them. The first card being Blood Baron. So Blood Baron's really good with Pro White and Pro Black. It gets around decks like Control where they're not able to use things like Azorius Charm on him. It also gets around things like Doomblade, even despite the fact that he's a black creature. He still gets around removal like that. Also like Hero's Downfall, he gets around really tough spot removal that's in the format that's just really good right now. He dies to Mizzium Mortars, which isn't really as big of a problem, but he's just a pretty good creature for us with lifelink Pro White, Pro Black, and being a 4/4 creature for 5. And if we're able to satisfy his other part of his ability, where if we're at 30 or more life and our opponent's at 10 or less life, he gets +6 and gets flying, so he just kind of becomes a win more card at that point. So we have 3 of them. He's just a really good card. He's really well positioned in the meta. Obzedat. So Obzedat is really good because he lets us gain and drain some life. He's kind of like Blood Baron for us. He's really good in the 5 spot. And he's able to blink himself out, so at the beginning of our end step we can exile him, and if we do, he comes back under its owner's control at the beginning of the next upkeep, and it gains haste as well. So we can keep on using that gain and drain each and every time, and it's especially good up against decks like Blue-White Control, where Blue-White Control may try to balance things out by using Azorius Charm or Celestial Flare to deal with our creatures, and we don't necessarily have to attack with Obzedat to be able to connect and deal the damage. And the only real way that Blue-White Control is going to be able to deal with them at like an instant speed is usually going to be to quicken and then play Supreme Verdict, which they don't always have an outlet for. But Obzedat's really awesome for the blink ability. He lets us gain back some life and just kind of even the score out. He gives us a little bit of leeway for a lot of different matchups where our opponent's trying to grind us out. The two Sire of Insanity. So Sire of Insanity, he's a pretty slow card, but he's also amazing up against the control matchups and also against mid-range as well. So if our board presence is good enough, we can play him. He's a 6/4 for 6, and at the beginning of each end step, each player is going to discard his or her hand. So we're going to force everybody to discard everything, and we're just going to be playing in top deck mode, which is great because we do play Underworld Connections, so if we have to dig a little bit, we can dig and play some extra things and have some outlets to actually be able to refill our hand. But Sire's really good up against control just because you don't want your opponent to have a hand of any good answers or threats for us when we're playing against control. Elspeth just makes tokens, blows up creatures power 4 or greater with her -3, and with her ultimately gives us really huge and powerful creatures that usually our opponent's not going to be able to deal with. If we get that emblem off, it's going to be really tough for our opponent to be able to bounce back if we're swinging in every turn, giving all of our creatures +2/+2 and flying. For the removal, Chain to the Rocks is pretty universal. We enchant a mountain we control, we just pay 1 white for it, and it acts pretty much like Oblivion Ring. We are going to exile a creature, although it only has the drawback of being a creature removal. It doesn't remove anything else, but besides the point, it is going to remove a creature for us, and it's going to stay exiled until as long as Chain to the Rock stays on the battlefield. So if it goes away, if our opponent finds some kind of enchantment removal for it, then they get their creature back, but usually that's not going to be the case. So Chain to the Rocks is pretty good. Mizzium Mortars just being able to deal 4 to target creature we don't control, and if we get the overload playing up against like aggro or anything like that, we can wipe out the board, especially if we're getting rid of a bunch of pack rats or something like that. Ultimate price for monocolored creatures, it really just depends on the matchup. Like mono red devotion's pretty good to have like ultimate price for, and mono like green red monsters is sometimes good. There are like a few mono green decks that I've run into that you can use the ultimate price for, but there's a lot of stuff that ultimate price still hits in the meta, so it's pretty good. Mono black's being played a pretty decent bit, so ultimate price is probably a better choice than Doomblade in the main board. So that was kind of like the meta decision right now before Born of the Gods is out. Hero's Downfall, pretty universal, just kind of gets rid of creatures and planeswalkers all alike. It doesn't really have a bias as long as it's as long as you're able to hit and it doesn't have like pro black or something like that. You should be in the clear to use Hero's Downfall to get rid of important MVP cards that your opponent may have. Warleader's Helix is good in a pinch to be able to gain back some life whenever you're playing up against your opponent's like aggro strategies. Being able to gain back 4 life and get rid of one of their creatures is usually really good. Thoughtseize is great. It sides out against the aggro matchups, like anything that's just trying to outrace us, like Red Deck Wins or Mono Red Devotion. But otherwise, playing it up against mid-range, Mono Black, or Control, it's just really good. The Rakdos Keyrune, like I mentioned before, it's both a creature and a outlet of ramp for us to allow us to do better things. Because we can't be greedy with playing Mutavault, Rakdos Keyrune's like the next best thing for us. The Underworld Connections just for drawing cards. Unfortunately, we're not playing Grey Merchant in here, so we can't capitalize on Black Devotion or anything like that, but having an outlet for being able to draw is great. Whip of Erebos, I mentioned the interaction with Obzedat, wherever he's hiding. There he is. So Obzedat and Whip of Erebos interact where if we whip back Obzedat onto the battlefield from the grave, Obzedat's exile, where he's going to be coming back, is going to supersede Whip of Erebos's. Well, if this card leaves the battlefield from anywhere, it's like exiled permanently. So Obzedat supersedes that, and you're able to get your Obzedat back at the beginning of the upkeep, which was a controversial thing with Whip of Erebos whenever it came out, and people were kind of struggling to see where that ruling was going to go, but it turns out that Obzedat does supersede that, and it makes it a whole lot harder for decks like Control to be able to get around Obzedat, unless they go and syncopate it or something like that, where it exiles it. Rakdos' return sides out up against decks that are generally going to be faster than us. We want to be playing this up against decks that are slower and are going to be playing high-value things in the later game, so forcing them to discard everything is generally what we're going to want to try to do. And the Assembled Legion is, again, generally another card that we want for the slower matchups, where we're just going to kind of build up an army over the course of a couple turns and just kind of build threats, where our opponent either needs to deal with the threats or deal with the card itself early on, but otherwise we can be doing things in the meantime. And then for the sideboard, so the sideboard, I have 2 Doomblade. So Doomblade is going to be siding in for the decks that are going to be playing a lot of creatures, and they're preferably not black. So up against things like aggro, and up against decks that are like devotion based, like red-green monsters or mono-red devotion, things like that. Doomblade's just great for that. So we can just hit creatures that don't have a bias. The Dark Betrayal is for the mono-black matchup. Any other decks that are playing a lot of black creatures like red-black aggro, Dark Betrayal is going to be good for that. 2 more Warleader's Helix for the aggro matchups and anything that is damage-based, so we can side those in and gain back some more life. We have the outlet to gain back life outside of like Blood Baron and Obzedat, and also Whip of Erebos that gives lifelink. We do have 3 Anger of the Gods, so Anger of the Gods dealing 3 damage to each creature, and if a creature dealt damage this way would die this turn, it's exiled instead, which may or may not make a difference. But the Anger of Gods as like a Slag Storm for everything is pretty good for us to have at a sorcery speed. Mainly just up against like red deck wins, or anything that's just going to pump out a lot of creatures and make a horizontal presence in terms of the board. So another Assembled Legion for like the slower matchups, where it's just another win con that we have that our opponent needs to deal with. I do have 3 Slaughter Games for the mid-range and the Control matchups, mainly Control, because with Control you can start taking away your opponent's win conditions, things like Sphinx's Revelation and stuff like that, so the Slaughter Games is just perfect. It can't be countered as well, so you can get around Dissolves and Syncopates and stuff like that, so 3 of the Slaughter Games, and 2 Pithing Needle. So Pithing Needle up against any cards that our opponents have that are going to be using good activated abilities, things like Planeswalkers, and also things like Pack Rat. There's, even if you want to go as far as Underworld Connections after it enchants something, like if it enchants a swamp, you can name Swamp, and Pithing Needle is going to restrict your opponent from tapping any swamps that have that activated ability from Underworld Connections. But generally anything with any deck with a lot of cards that are going to be using activated abilities towards their advantage, Pithing Needle is great for that, especially if they're like Planeswalker based, like Jace Architect of Thought, for being able to dig or anything like that. So Pithing Needle is great for that, and it's pretty appropriate because there isn't a whole lot of artifact removal floating around right now. So that is our deck for Dega Midrange for the Theros season of Standard. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did, be sure to drop a like button on the video, and the entire deck list is in the description below. If you guys enjoyed this video and would like to see more Magic the Gathering content, you can hit the subscribe button on the screen and you'll be notified whenever a new video is available. And for those of you guys that enjoy Yu-Gi-Oh!, you can check out my Yu-Gi-Oh! Channel by clicking on the video in the top right hand corner. Also, be sure to check out our sponsors for the channel, ABU Games and Europe's MTG Madness, for all of your Magic the Gathering needs, no matter where you are.